Chapter 4. The Lamp's Secret. When the lighthouse lamp hit the floor, it cracked in half. "Oh!" Holly cried out. "You naughty dog!" As Pete bent over to pick up the lamp, Sue started to cry. "Our beautiful lighthouse is ruined," she sobbed. Zip stopped wagging his tail and hung his head. "It wasn't exactly your fault, old boy," Pam said, patting him. "Your tail wags too hard, that's all." Mrs. Hollister did not know what to say. Uncle Russ had sent them such a lovely gift, and now it was broken before even being used. "Don't worry, Mother," Pete consoled her. "I think I can mend the lamp. Dad, you know that new kind of cement the trading post sells? I'll experiment with it." "All right, dear," said his mother, "but we'll wait till morning." "Before you apply the cement, Pete, be sure to roughen up both the surfaces so the cement will get a firm grip," his father advised. When Pete awakened the next day, he hopped out of bed and dressed quickly. His brother and sisters were still sleeping when he tiptoed downstairs. The boy found his mother and father seated at the breakfast table. "Good morning, Mother and Dad," Pete said. "Goodness, you're up early," his mother replied, kissing him. "I thought I'd ride down to the trading post with Dad and get that cement," Pete said. He ate with his parents, then drove off with his father. By the time Pete returned with the cement, the other children were halfway through breakfast. Pete explained where he had been, then went to the kitchen. Presently, Mrs. Hollister brought in a dish of soft-boiled eggs and set them on the table. A mischievous look came into Ricky's eyes. After he had cracked an egg and scooped it out into his dish, he slid out of his chair and followed Pete into the kitchen. "Hey, if that mending cement's any good, how about putting this shell together?" he whispered. Pete grinned. "Think I can't do it, eh?" "If you can, I'll play a trick," Ricky said, and returned to the table. He had just finished eating when Pete returned and slipped the mended egg into his brother's hand. When no one was looking, Ricky replaced it in the bowl. "It sure looks as if it had never been cracked," he thought. Aloud, he said, "Holly, there's one egg left. Don't you want it?" "Oh, you take it," she said. "I don't want any more egg. Pam, why don't you eat it?" "No, thanks." Poor Ricky. How was he going to make his joke work? He couldn't ask Sue because she never opened her own eggs. Mrs. Hollister, who was busy arranging some cut flowers in a bowl, suggested that the boy take it. Ricky was stumped for a minute. Then he had an idea. "Will you please crack it for me?" he asked. "Why, Ricky, you're big enough to do that," his mother said. "Oh, the egg tastes better when you crack it, Mother," he teased her. Mrs. Hollister put down the flowers and went to the table. She reached over and took the egg. Then she cracked it on the side of Ricky's dish and held it up. Nothing dropped out. What?" Mrs. Hollister exclaimed, as Holly, Pam, and Sue stared in bewilderment. Pete and Ricky laughed hard. "Just advertising a good cement," Pete said. When the other children saw that it was a joke, they all started to laugh, and Mrs. Hollister said, "You boys, you're always up to something. Pete, if you could mend the lamp as well as you did that egg, it would be as good as new." Pete went back to the cellar, with Ricky following him. The younger boy watched as his brother took the sharp end of a file and roughened the edges of the broken surfaces by making crisscross marks on the pottery. All at once he exclaimed, "Hey, Ricky, look, what's this?" Something green was sticking out of the clay. "Chip it out," Ricky said excitedly. Pete carefully dug around the green object, and a moment later it fell into his hand. It was about the size of a small pea. "Say," he cried, "it looks like an emerald." "An emerald? That's worth a lot of money." "Sure is." Pete got a rag and wiped the stone. The more he polished it, the brighter it became. Excitedly, the two boys rushed upstairs and showed it to Mrs. Hollister. "It does look genuine," she said. I think you'd better check on this with Mr. Peters, the jeweler, downtown. I'll go with you, Pam offered. I want to look at something in his store anyway. Mrs. Hollister suggested that Ricky stay at home and put the wheels back on his coaster wagon. So Pete and Pam set off without him. Well, the happy Hollisters, said Mr. Peters pleasantly, as Pete and Pam came into his shop. What can I do for you today? Pete told him about the green stone they had found and handed it to the jeweler, who peered at it through a magnifying glass. He said, this is the real thing, all right. Pushing his spectacles up to his forehead, he looked at Pete and Pam. This emerald is worth $500. The children gasped. $500? Pete, still hardly believing his ears, held out his hand for the emerald. But the jeweler said, something as valuable as this should be carried in a box. He took down several small boxes. Here, I guess this is about the right size, he remarked, opening one and placing the stone on a piece of cotton inside. Then he closed the lid and handed the box to Pam, smiling. Be sure to go right home and give it to your mother, he advised. Pam paused, though, to look at a tray of charm bracelets. She put down the box to try one on. Oh, let's go, Pete urged, so they started for home. Reaching the house, they ran excitedly to their mother. It's an emerald, a real gem, Pam exclaimed. She handed the box to Mrs. Hollister, who removed the lid. A strange look came over her face. Why, there's nothing in the box, Pam, she said. Is this another trick? Pete and Pam looked alarmed. There was nothing in the box but a fluffy white piece of cotton. It's not a trick, Pam wailed. The stone was in there. Then you must have lost it on the way home, Mrs. Hollister said. I don't see how we could have, Mother, Pete remarked. Pam had it in her hand all the time, and we didn't open the box once. Nevertheless, it's gone, Mrs. Hollister said. Start from our front door and retrace every step you took. The other children heard the commotion and said they would help search. Several of their friends joined in the hunt also. After a while, Sue sighed wearily. This is harder than hunting for Easter eggs, she said. The searchers covered every inch of ground Pete and Pam had taken, but the emerald was not found. Maybe somebody picked it up, Holly said, as they neared the jewelry shop. When Mr. Peters saw them peering intently at the sidewalk, he stepped out of his door and said, What's going on? Did you lose something? We can't find the lovely emerald, Pam said with a woebegone look. She explained to the jeweler how she had arrived home with an empty box. All at once, Mr. Peters' eyes lit up. Follow me, he said. The man turned on his heel and went to the counter of his store. 2 other little white boxes were lying there. He picked one up and opened it. There on the cotton lay the beautiful gem. Pam, you picked up the wrong box after you looked at the bracelets, he smiled. The girl was so relieved that she nearly burst into tears. She raced all the way home with the box to show Mrs. Hollister the emerald. I'm certainly glad you found it, she said. And isn't it beautiful? It took Pete the rest of the morning to mend the broken lamp, but he made a very good job of it. That's splendid, his mother said. Maybe we ought to put the lamp in the trading post window to advertise the cement, Pete chuckled. A little while later, Mr. Hollister drove home to lunch, and Pam told him about the wonderful gem. Don't you think we'd better call up Uncle Russ and ask him who made the lamp? She said. If that's the person who lost the emerald, he'll be glad to get it back. You're right, put the call in, her father said. But let Mother do the talking. Pam went immediately to the telephone, and a few minutes later was connected with her uncle at Seagull Beach. Mrs. Hollister took the instrument and thanked her brother-in-law for the lamp. Then she explained how it had been broken, and Pete had found the emerald inside. That's amazing, Uncle Russ said. An elderly woman who lives here made that lighthouse. Her name is Mrs. Alden, but everybody up here calls her Grandma Alden. She'll be excited to hear about this. But say, wouldn't it be a good idea for all of you to come up? Bring the gem and tell her about it. He added that Aunt Marge and Teddy and Jean would join him soon. It would be fun for all the children to be together. "Let me talk to John, will you please?" Uncle Russ said. Mrs. Hollister gave the phone to her husband. Presently a smile came over his face. "All right, Russ, I guess you win. I'll arrange for all of us to come in a few days. Goodbye." When the children heard this, they began to whoop and jump around. They were going to Seagull Beach to hunt for pirate treasure. "Do you think you can be ready to leave in 2 days?" Mr. Hollister asked his wife. "I'm sure we can do it, John." "Oh boy, I'll be able to fly a kite in the meet," Pete exclaimed. "Daddy, may I earn some kite material by helping you with the trading post?" "Sure thing. Come down with me after lunch." Pete helped his father for more than a day, and in return got kite sticks, paper, and lots of string and glue, which he packed into his suitcase. Whitenose, the Hollister's cat, and her 5 kittens were to be left with Jeff and Ann Hunter. It was decided that Zip would go on the trip with the family. Finally, the time arrived for the happy Hollisters to leave. The station wagon was packed, and everyone took his place. The children's friends gathered in the driveway, and as the car pulled out, they all shouted, "Have a good time!" "Win the kite contest, Pete! Find the pirate treasure! Goodbye, goodbye!" As Mr. Hollister drove along, he said to his wife, "I'm glad we got an early start today. We'll be able to make this trip in about a day and a half." "Where are we going to stay tonight?" Sue asked. "Oh, that's a surprise," he laughed. The children became so busy talking about the adventures they might have at Seagull Beach that the morning passed very quickly. Finally, it was time to stop for lunch. Sue spied a roadside stand, which had a pony corral alongside it. "Please let's stop and have lunch here," she said, "so I can have a pony ride." "Oh yes, let's," Ricky begged. Her father pulled into the parking lot, and they walked through a gate to a corral. Only one pony was not busy, so Sue had the first turn. The owner lifted her onto one of the cute little animals. Sue held onto the reins and said, "Get up!" She started around the track. How proud and straight Sue carried herself on the pony's back. On the second time around the corral, the pony suddenly headed for a little gate on the far side. Somebody had left it ajar about 2 inches. The animal pushed the gate open with his nose and trotted out of the corral. "Go back," Sue told him. But the pony, once he was free, set off at a fast clip. Sue screamed, trying to hold on tightly as the pony jogged along. He headed straight down the road, with the rest of the Hollisters in pursuit.